Hi, Rich Gimbert, the Civil War Traveler here, and I am in the beautiful Honey Springs, Oklahoma battlefield. And today we're commemorating the 155th anniversary of the 1863 battle. And with me I have the privilege of speaking with Preston Weir, a member of the Oklahoma Historic Society. Preston, how are you today?
I'm great. A little warm, but other than that, I'm fine.
Well, it is summer in Oklahoma.
Sure.
Thank you for taking the time with talking to me about in talking to me today. Can you tell me a little bit about your outfit that you're wearing today, please?
What I'm wearing today is what some of the troops would have worn. This is jean cloth. One direction it's wool, the other direction it's cotton. This is actually a summer uniform. It has a liner in it, and it's not as warm as you think, because once this liner of Onisburg gets wet, it's kind of like a thermos bottle. It kind of protects you from the heat. But almost everything a soldier wore was wool. Trousers are wool, socks are wool. So the shirt's cotton though.
Okay, so you're also carrying something that is a little out of the norm. I noticed that you're carrying an authentic Austrian Lorenz rifle. Can you please tell me about it?
The way you can tell the age of a Lorenz rifle is the last two numbers, as you can see there, are 6.2. So this is an 1862 Austrian Lorenz, most likely a Confederate rifle, because it's a 54 caliber. The Union had these, but they were 58. Now, as you also notice, it says GEO on the stock, which would be the abbreviation at that time for George or Georgia. Now, the range on this goes up to, believe it or not, 900 yards. But you could hit something at 600 yards, easy. So if there were a line of men that stretched 3/4 of a mile wide, you wouldn't have a problem shooting them from that distance with this. Now this is a muzzle loader, meaning that it has to, everything is loaded through here. So you have a ramrod to load it. They taught the soldiers to load in 9 movements. I don't have my cartridge box with me, or I'd show you that. But after it's loaded, you put a little cap on this hole. It has fulminated mercury in it, just like your cap pistols, and it looks like a little hat. It goes on that firing cone there. So when a hammer comes down, it shoots fire into the raw powder that you've loaded in here, and the bullet spins out, of course. And that was what caused the greater casualties in the Civil War, because the tactics that they used was from the Continental Wars, where everybody stands shoulder to shoulder and they wanted to deliver a massive fire. But that was with smoothbore muskets that would shoot. You were doing good to hit somebody at 100 feet.
Right, right.
So, but this one, you can shoot way out there. So it was an ounce of lead. This one's 54 caliber. In Mississippi, after the war, for 3 years, their major expenditure of the government was on cork legs for the returning soldiers, because at a distance, this shoots what they call a rainbow trajectory. It's not flat like a Springfield. It's like an old 03 Springfield or something, which would shoot like that. This goes boom. In other words, see, that's why we've got that sight that raises up like that. So if you're at 600 yards out there, look at how high the end of my muzzle is.
Right.
So the bullet would come up and down. It would go through your leg and hit the other person behind you in the foot. So that's why that they had such amputations, because that lead, even today, it shatters. It, instead of penetrating, it pulverizes the bone.
Right.
So it caused, massive wounds.
Right, right. So, would you say that this rifle was more accurate, less accurate than your standard Confederate Enfield or your standard Federal Springfield?
This was what they called a B model. In other words, this was a second. What they wanted you to have was Enfield. Enfields were very accurate. This one was accurate, but it's about 3 inches shorter. It's a 3-band musket, but it's about 3 inches shorter than the normal Enfield. But no, the Army of Tennessee had these, and they were at this battle as well.
Okay. Speaking of this battle,
yes.
would you like to tell us about what happened here 155 years ago this week?
I will, but while we're still on uniforms, I want to point out this young man right here. He's a Cherokee that came to this battle, and if you'll notice what he's wearing an overshirt, he has a sash, and his hat has a strap to tie it on. So he was probably cavalry. He rode a horse because he didn't want his hat to blow off. Now, this is Cherokee, syllabary, but we don't know what it says. The picture is backwards because you can see on his pistol there, that's the loading indentation there that goes where you press the caps on the firing cone. And that's on the right side of the pistol, not the left. So that means this photograph is flipped.
Right. So he's actually holding the pistol with his right hand instead of his left.
No, the whole photograph's flipped.
Right.
These words are backwards.
Right.
That was a common thing for them to do, is to, if you were taking a picture of say a fiddler that was going to play with his right hand, well, he would play with his left hand to make it look right in the photograph.
Gotcha.
But this young man is still here, about maybe a mile from here.
Okay.
He got killed at this battle. We can't read his name because the photographer stuck his thumb in the emulsion. That's a thumbprint right there that covers up the last part of his name. But the day of July 17th, 1863 was hot like today, but it was muggy. It had rained off and on, and when the Federal soldiers came in from the north on the other side of Elk Creek early in the morning, and they were so thirsty that there were hoof prints and wagon prints in the road, the Texas road, and they would get down and slurp the water up out of those hoof prints there that they were so thirsty. So the Federal pulled up there, they rested a little bit, and then they formed into, I think, by columns. They advanced, and then they more or less unfolded by company into line. Each company left room. They went into a line. Each one wheeled into a big broad line that made at least 3/4, maybe a mile wide up on that plain. The Confederates had been here at Honey Springs. Honey Springs was a supply depot. In other words, they had hams, bacon, molasses, everything that an army would need stashed at this old town, Honey Springs. The spring's still there, and it never dries up. That's what made it popular, even in a summertime like this. But what had happened is that General Cooper, the commander of the Confederates, had decided to attack Fort Gibson, which is 30 miles from here, a federal fort. Now it's up by Muskogee. But he was going to attack Fort Gibson to get Indian Territory back for the Confederacy. Well, someone, a spy, told General Blunt about the plan. So General Blunt decided to attack, not wait for the attack, but attack first. So that's what happened on July 17th. He crossed the river. It had been raining, and I think there were at least 2 Federals that drowned crossing the river because people back then, for the most part, didn't know how to swim. If you fell in the water over your head, you literally were sunk.
Right. There's been a number of cases reported of soldiers falling into the Mississippi, never to be seen again.
That's right. So in that morning, they unfolded their battle line. They had, I think, 12 cannon. The Confederates had one battery, Roswell Lee's battery, which had, I believe it had 3 mountain housers, 12-pounders, and it had one experimental rifle. It was 2.5 inches bore on it, but it was a cannon, but it was like a rifle. It was rifled. The others were smooth bore. They just, like a big shotgun, they shot out there. They would shoot a round ball, or they could shoot the little balls called canisters, which was like a shotgun. But, so the Federals opened up on the Confederates. Now, what the Confederates had done was pretty smart, because they knew that the Federals had the weight, what they call the weight of artillery. They had 12 guns. The Confederates didn't have near that many. So what they did to lessen the effect of that is the Confederates formed up in the woods right at the edge of the tree line. So the guns are not going to be able to get up in there, and they can't see
Right.
who they're shooting at. And also, the Federals had cavalry, the kind of cavalry with swords that come out and whack you. Now, the Confederates were all cavalry except for one unit, the 20th Texas, which was dismounted cavalry. They marched over here from Fort Smith. But obviously, if they get up in the woods, these woods are so thick. You can see right there. This is the same kind of growth that was here at the battle. You can't ride a horse through that.
No, you can't.
So that was why they were formed up in the trees like that. They didn't come out. So the Union cannonaded the Confederates for an hour and a half, and they struck one of the guns, and I believe it killed 12 of the crew, and dismounted that gun. Now that was right beside the Texas Road. When you take the tour, you'll see where the path crosses the Texas Road. Right to the left of it was where the gun was dismounted. Now the Confederates used their 2.5-inch experimental rifle to try to kill the General Blunt. They shot at him, and it was about 3/4 of a mile away, I'm thinking. They almost killed him. They took the head off of his adjutant, I believe, that was riding right beside him, which would have changed the whole battle, but, you know,
Right.
it didn't happen that way. So after an hour and a half of cannonading, they approached, and when they got to the edge of the woods, the Confederates were ready, the Federals were ready, and as it worked out, they both gave the command of fire at the same time. Exactly the same time. In fact, some of the old veterans heard the Federals giving the command, and they thought it was for them, and vice versa. So they fired, and that massive fire, that's where a lot of the casualties came from right off. So they stood there, shoulder to shoulder, and they had it out for about an hour. And then, now when I say that they fired, when you fire this with black powder, this is going to cause a huge cloud of smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So a battle line, you can't tell who's almost even standing beside you.
Right.
That's why flags are real important. It's up above the smoke,
Right.
and you can
bugle calls.
see. And bugle calls also. Bugle calls was also for infantry, because they would give you the command: forward, stop, fire. We think today that bugle calls are primarily for cavalry, because that's what we saw on television. But they used them for artillery and for infantry as well, because they would pierce through the din of battle. So they stood there, shoulder to shoulder, firing away, and then some, I believe it was some Colorado unit, or it might have been Wisconsin, they came in through that smoke, and they got in front of the 1st Kansas, which is a black unit. And so they said, get back, get out of the way, you know, we're shooting here. And what? And so they said, pull back, and finally it became such a big commotion, but pull back, that the commander on the other side, which was the 29th Texas, Colonel Charles DeMorse, he thought that there was a hole opening in the line. So he said, charge them, boys, because they pulled back, but they were just realigning. They weren't pulling back.
They weren't in retreat.
No.
They were there to fight.
Right. So the 29th Texas advanced. The first color bearer fell, dead. They picked up the flag. They retreated back. Charge. They charged back in that hole a second time. Color bearers shot. They can't penetrate. So then they pull back, and they tried a third time. And this time, when the flag goes down, it stays down. No color bearer picks it up. They bring it back. The Federals they pull back. So there's a hole right in the middle of the line. So they start funneling in through that hole and pouring out to the left and right. And the old soldiers know when to run.
Mm-hmm.
So they start pulling back. Now that flag, we don't know where it is, but we think that Kansas picked it up, and Kansas has 3 unidentified flags, Confederate flags. We think it's one of those.
Okay.
But Anyway, so they pull back down to the north side of the creek. Now here's where hand-to-hand combat happens. The Federals are running up there. They've got their bayonets fixed. There's hand-to-hand combat. The Confederates are trying to hold long enough to get the guns back. There's a toll bridge there across this creek. And if you go to this creek, it's just like it was then. It's about 65 feet down to the water. It's cold, dark, and people are running across the bridge, falling off the bridge. An old newspaper account says there was a cannon in the creek, and somebody recovered it back in the early 1900s, and they used it for 4th of July picnics and things. But anyway, so there's where the hand-to-hand battle is. The Federals form up. They force the Confederates across the bridge, and then they get into a gully on the other side. Meanwhile, this Colonel de Morse that we were talking about, he has a horse called Selim. It's a big white horse. He's trained as a trick horse. The horse can rear up on its hind legs on command. It can count. How many is 2 and 3, Selim? And he would use his hoof to count. The other thing that he can do on command is play dead. So Colonel de Morse is severely wounded in, I believe, his right arm. So he was trying to tough out the battle, but all his officers said, no, you got to go to the field hospital right now because you're losing way too much blood. So he takes off to the field hospital. But meanwhile, the Federals have broken the line and they're coming down through there, and he's receiving so much fire on his big white horse that he realizes he's not going to make it. So he tells the horse to lay down and play dead. So he takes his arm and smears some blood over the side of the horse's neck. Now this is the legend from him. Then he kind of scoops up under the horse's neck, and when the Federals come charging up, they just charge right over him and keep going down to the creek. And when they're past, well, he tells the horse to get up, and then they ride to the field hospital. And he lived to tell the tale. So the fight continues at the creek. The Federals are on the north side, the Confederates are on the south side, and they're having a intense battle. Until finally, the Federals go up the creek, there's other fords, and down the creek. And they cross over, they're flanked. Yeah. The Confederates are flanked. So they've got to pull out of there. Otherwise, they could have held that bridge forever. There's, Federals trying to get across, or falling off the bar, and, all kinds of things are happening. So they push them out, and then right behind them are other Confederate camps that are on that hill. So when the Federals go through that camp, they're finding all this tentage and food still on the fire, and their forks, all their baggage is still there. So the Federals push the Confederates. They form up, but the Confederates have been divided. Part of them are over here, and part of them over there, and the Yankees went through the middle. So they can't have enough mass of men to hold the Federals. So the Federals break the line all the way down 2 miles to the top of Pumpkin Ridge, which if you go down there to Honey Springs, there's a big ridge up there. And at that point, the Choctaw troops and Chickasaws run out on their horses, and they give the rebel yell, which is a little different because it's the Indian version. They run out with their rifles, and they cause the Federals have to stop and form their lines. As they're pulling up there, they're kind of disorganized, so they've got to stop, get everybody in line. Meanwhile, the Confederates are abandoning Honey Springs Depot. One of the fellows that was there said that he set fire to the building, one of the main buildings, and said that the Yankees were only 200 feet away from it when that happened. They were so close. Now, when the Federals are there, if you look at this, any kind of history about this battle, there's a great drawing by a fine Irish fellow by the name of James O'Neill. He was an illustrator for a newspaper. I think it went in, it might have been Harper's. But anyway, he was on our left side, the Federals' right, and he saw the charge into Honey Springs proper, and he illustrated it for the paper. Now, what happened to him? what happened to him was less than a month later, he was in Kansas, and with General Blunt, and General Blunt came up to Baxter Springs, and he thought that he was going to be received. Oh, he got the band out for pomp and circumstance. Hey, we're going to have a, but unbeknownst to him, that Quantrill's raiders were there.
Yeah, and the Battle of Fort Blair and the Baxter Springs Massacre occurred. So let's talk about the museum a little bit, the Museum and Visitor Center. It seems to be fairly new, a year or two old, right?
I believe we opened it, this is the second of memorial that I believe that we've had here, so that it's not, we haven't designed the exhibits and things for it yet, but it's still a good space. We have traveling exhibits that come here, but hopefully this year we have the money to the state.
So the permanent exhibits are still en route, so this place is only going to get better, and it's pretty good now, to be honest with you. It's excellent now. There's a reenactment that occurs here yearly, right? And
every other year.
Every other year?
It'll be next year in 2019.
2019, and what month does that usually happen?
Well, we used to try to have it on the anniversary date,
Right.
but it's just too hot in wool uniforms, and people of today are not used to it. So we have it in November. It'll be around November 9th or 11th in there.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ware, I'd like to thank you for your time, and thank you for that excellent explanation of the Battle of Honey Springs. My name is Rich Gimbert. I'm the Civil War Traveler, and I'll see you on the trail.